Hey, it's been a while. There's been a lot going on in my life and I just haven't had the space or capacity for social media. But today I've got a video that is for a very specific group of people. If you are someone who is often being told by others that you need to have better personal boundaries, then I really want you to tune into this one. So in the last few weeks, I came across a phrase. It's been around for a while, but it's new to me. And that phrase is trauma dumping. The other word for it is emotional dumping. And it's something that I sought out because I wanted to understand a dynamic that goes on a lot in my space, in my world. So when it comes to trauma dumping, there are two parties involved in two different dynamics. Trauma dumping itself happens when someone is in a space in their life where it's really distressing, it's really challenging, and that person is not able to process their emotion in healthy ways. So they tend to overshare, or they tend to share compulsively and continuously to anyone who appears to be willing to listen to them. The other side of trauma dumping is the person who is dumped on. And this is actually why I was reaching out to look for a definition about what often happens in my life. And I know that a lot of you will have this often happen in your life as well. So people who are victims of trauma dumping tend to be those who are good listeners, who are often very empathetic, who hold space for others and are generally very caring about what goes on in other people's lives. The issue is that someone who is not processing their emotional challenges in a healthy way tend to latch on to these empathetic ears. And you'll know if this happens in your life a lot, because if you're like me and you are someone who genuinely cares for people and is concerned for their well-being and their happiness, it can be that people come into your life in various ways, and however the relationship starts, it ends up that you are their constant therapist. That people come into your life, they pick up the phone, they step into your space, and immediately they launch into everything that's going on in their world that is challenging them, everything that's upset them, all the dramas that are going on in their world. And the issue with trauma dumping is that it's not doing them any good, because once again, they're not actually processing that emotion in a healthy way. They're just carrying it and they're trying to dump it out on someone so that they feel a bit lighter. And it's not good for those of us who are sitting in that space and listening to it constantly, because it is emotionally very draining, it is exhausting, and it impacts poorly on our well-being. The issue that I think I found and that I had to work through is that anyone out there who is a therapist or understands psychology would say to someone who is a victim of trauma dumping, just put up your personal boundaries. You need better personal boundaries. Now, I know that that is actually an incredibly difficult thing to do for a lot of people. If you are genuinely really considerate and compassionate and empathetic for other people, also if you're a people pleaser, which is absolutely chronically me, telling someone to put up a boundary, you might as well be telling them to grow wings and fly. It just feels so foreign. So here is my advice to you if you are someone who tends to get trauma dumped on a lot. Here is my advice to you if you have people who come into your world as co-workers, as neighbours, as friends, as, random strangers, and they tend to, every time they talk to you, they just want to give you their problems and their concerns, and it's overwhelming, and you don't know how to deal with it in a healthy way, and you don't really understand what it means to put up a personal boundary. Here's two things that I think may help you, because I know that they've certainly helped me over the past few weeks. So there's two simple parts to the advice I'm going to give you. The first is to come back to the intent that you had in the relationship, and the second is to come back to your needs in that relationship. So let's look at intent first of all. If you're like me and you have people who come into your world on occasion and they just want you to be their therapist and they just dump their stuff on you, come back to what your original intent was in your relationship with them. So it may be that you only ever intended for them to be your neighbour, or you only ever intended for them to be your work colleague, or you only ever intended for them to be an acquaintance that you saw on occasion. Coming back to that intent just reminds you of how that relationship has actually been warped, right? It has been pulled away because of their emotional needs from what your true intent was initially. Once you've determined what that intent was in that relationship, then you can come back to what your needs are from the relationship. So for instance, if you've got a workmate, that was always your intent, just to have a working relationship with someone, and all of a sudden you've found that they also come into your space and just constantly dump their emotional stuff on you. Come back to what your needs are in that work relationship. So, working relationship, I need to just hear from you what our tasks are, how we can work together on that, and what the solutions are to any challenges that we have. Knowing those two things has been really empowering for me. I don't need to try and build up a boundary. I just come back to, hey, what was my intent and how has that been warped, right? How have I been pulled away from that involuntarily? And what are my needs and how can I start coming back to having those needs fulfilled whenever I talk to this person? Now, of course, it means that you do have to deal with the relationship in some way, and often what that means is just making yourself less available. Sorry, I just don't have time for this. Or it may be that you become a little more open and say, look, this isn't really the kind of relationship that I intended. I really just want to talk about work, or I really just want to talk about the thing going on in our neighborhood. If you have trouble building personal boundaries and preventing people from dumping their stuff on you without any consideration or concern for what's going on in your life or how you are feeling in any moment, then try to look at those two things instead. Try to come back to what your intent was in that relationship, and therefore what your needs will be in that relationship, and see if that helps empower you in the same way it's empowered me recently. Be well. Bye.